Hi and welcome to Fast Fashion Focus. During this segment I'm going to show you how to pattern a garment that's currently very popular in the high street stores. Today we're looking at two of the more popular trends, which is off the shoulder combined with a statement sleeve. We're going to pattern this garment here, which is a knit garment with a slashed open sleeve and a curved hemline. To complete this, you're going to need a knit tunic block or a knit tunic pattern. If you don't have one, just head on over to my website and you can download one from the shop. I often get asked, how do you take a completed pattern and change it into an entirely new garment? So this video will show you some of the steps involved in that. So what we're going to be doing is taking the knit tunic pattern here and changing it into this garment here. The similarity between the two is that they are both knit fabrics, so you could use a ponte, you could use a sweatshirting, you could use a jersey, or just a standard t-shirting type fabric to make this garment in. So sometimes when we're creating a garment, it's easy to start from a finished pattern rather than start from a block, especially when we know that our finished pattern fits very similar to the way we want the final garment to sit. The reason I've chosen this knit tunic pattern as a base for this garment is because I've used it many times before in my commercial pattern making work. It always seems to sit really well on a variety of different body types, and it is my favorite pattern to use as a base block for many different types of garments. So often when we're developing a garment in fast fashion, we have a garment that we're going to work off to give us some inspiration for our design. So for this garment here, I'm going to work off this pattern here, which I've already created in conjunction with a retailer I work with for commercial pattern making work. So this garment here has already been in production and has been sold out in the shops. It's going to be a very similar design. The main difference is we patterned this as a woven fabric, and this is going to be developed in a knit. In addition to this, this dress here is quite tent-like, but I wanted this garment here to be more fitting through the body. So this is another reason I've chosen this tunic block here. It will skim through the upper body and developing some flare as it falls towards the hip. The idea was that this garment could be styled through the autumn months with either a pair of jeans or maybe on its own as a dress type tunic with an over the knee boot. So today's video is not about how to create an identical copy of a garment. If you want some tutorial instructions on that, just go and have a look at my website. Today's video is simply to show you some of the steps involved in creating a fast fashion garment. To begin, take a new sheet of pattern card and drop a vertical line to the left, which is going to represent our new centre front. Then at a balance point, square a line across and drop another vertical line that is going to represent our back. Then take your block pattern that you're working with, which, remembering our block pattern includes seam allowances, place this down matching the centre front, weight it down with pattern weights and trace around it. And repeat the process for the back. Now what we're going to do is take our tape measure and start putting some measurements on it. So if you have a garment you're working from, this process becomes very methodical and straightforward. I'm going to start working with the front, and the first position I want is the distance here from the shoulder down. I want to mark in the height at the top of my dress. So I'm just going to come to a reference point for me. This is shoulder neck point. I'm going to drop my tape measure down, and then I'm going to come here to the equivalent position on my pattern piece to the shoulder neck point and just mark that in. So that mark is the same as this top of this band here. And now I'm going to measure the band down. And when I have that measurement, I'm going to come across here and mark that in here. So now I have this measurement here and this measurement here. Now I want to know how long this dress is going to be. And that's entirely up to you. If you want to take the exact same measurement off this garment, you can. If you want to just go to a mirror and take a measurement going like this, that's fine too. So whatever length you'd like this to be. If you wanted to, you could change this dress into a top quite easily. So I'm going to come down, take a measurement, come to my pattern, going to mark in that measurement like so. So now I have the base positions for the front pattern piece, and what I need to do now is take my set square and square those across. So all I do is taking my set square, we're going to draw a position which is going to represent the top of the band, the bottom of the band. But for now I'm not going to draw too much of my hemline in, because I actually do want to scoop this and flare this. But what I will do for now is square a line off from the centre front just as a reference point, so I know what I'm working with. So now let's move on to the back pattern piece. So the process is exactly the same for my back pattern piece. I have a look at my garment, I mark in this position, and the hem length. So I'll go ahead and do that now. So now you need to take a good look at your garment that you're working from and just check everything you've done so far is fine. One thing I haven't mentioned is the original woven garment I'm working from has a raglan cut at the sleeve area, a raglan sleeve, but the garment I'm creating in the knit doesn't. That's because I want a different fit around the shoulder line. If you want to create this into a raglan, it's simply a matter of displacing the seams. And if you want help on that, just watch the video on my website, which is seam displacement. But basically what we're going to be doing with seam displacement is changing this angle here into something that would cut into the neckline more like this. So we would be changing this seam into this sort of an angle here. And whatever you did on the front, you'd also repeat for the back. So you could just take it by eye and bring this in and maybe change that line of the back armhole slightly too. If you really wanted to pattern this as a raglan, you may be better off starting with a raglan pattern to begin with. However, for this style here, because there's so much elastic in the band, the method I've just shown you here will be perfectly fine. So let's move on and look at the hemline area of this garment. So let's look at the hem area. This hem area here is scooped up and there's an almost godet-like insert there. I mentioned that I want to flare this garment out. I want it to go from a fit to a nice flare over the hips. So what I'm going to do now is just decide how much I want that to flare by. Now this is entirely up to you. I'm thinking about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so you can measure out from a point here and just mark a point. Then once you've done that, it's a good idea to measure from here to this point, double that measurement, and take your tape measure and go to a mirror and just check against yourself, assuming you are the same size as the garment you're creating, and just check that that's not going to be too big or too small. I want this to be flared without being voluminous because my original garment is quite tent-like. I don't want that on my knit garment. I just want more of a flare than there is. So I'm going to decide on this point here, and now I need to redraw in my front side seam, and I need to draw in a scoop as well. The easiest way to do this is to get the pattern back again. Remembering the pattern includes the side seams. So all I'm going to do is hold my pattern here, and I'm going to take that pattern and angle it out to my mark, and I'm going to redraw in that line. And remembering, as I just said, that this includes the side seams with the side seam allowance. So that is how far out my pattern is going to flare. Now I want a curved hem, and I just need to decide how high up I want this to be. When we have a curved hem into a side seam, if this is a dress, we need to think about modesty. So you can either take a tape measure and go to a mirror, or if you're working off a garment, take an approximate position. So when you have that, I'm going to just mark an approximate position as here, and I'm going to draw in a curve. And we want our curve from our hem to just maybe go up to the position we've marked. And you need to draw this in a couple of times until you're comfortable that the curve looks fine. So when you have this position here, we need to mark in the equivalent position here. That's going to end up being notched. So when you're ready, square a line across and find this position here. When you have this position here, we need to make sure that the front and the back are going to sew together. So we're going to measure the distance from there to there. And when we have that, we're going to put that same position here. We're going to take our back tunic pattern piece that we're using as a block, and we're going to redraw in the back line flared as well. Remembering that that already includes our seam allowance. Now we can redraw or draw in the scoop back hemline. So we can either just, and remembering we're going to start at this position here, and we can either just use our wrist like so, or just do it a couple of times until you're comfortable with the curve. So this pattern has a godé insert. If you didn't want that insert, you could simply notch this, and this pattern would be fine. If you do want a godé insert, you can go with your tape measure to your original garment and measure the length and width of your godé, or you can just come and guesstimate it on your pattern. I want my godé to be about this length. So what I need to do is just imagine that this is the center line of my godé. I'm just going to double check that that is straight. And now I know where the center is for my godé. I'm just going to draw in what I want the godé to look like. So that is that, like that. What I need to do now is mark in the equivalent position for the back piece. I'm now going to just extend this line here, assuming it's nice and straight. I'm going to measure from this position here through the center of my godé. When I have that measurement, I'm going to measure exactly the same amount on this side, put a mark in, and I'm just going to draw the godé in at the other side. And I can adjust this later. So now we have all our markings we need to create our front and our back pattern pieces. Let's assume we're not working with the raglan. Take a sheet of pattern card, slide it under this area here, and we want to trace off this. Remembering this is a folded piece. Then you need to add your seam allowance through here, and you need to add your seam or hem allowance through here. We also want to make sure we have a notch here. We're not going to worry about the band for now. That's just a visual clue to help us pattern. The same for the back. Assuming we're not working with the raglan, slide a sheet of pattern making card under here, and we're going to trace off our center back line across here, across to the flare, and down through the curve. Remembering that's also a folded piece, and we're not going to worry about the band for now. We need to add a seam allowance through here. We also need to add a seam allowance and hem allowance through here and here. Now we need to work on the gores. You need to take a sheet of pattern card, slide it under this area here, trace off this. Do the same for here, trace off this. And then we're going to join this to this. When we're looking at the gores, remembering that this includes a seam allowance. So we can simply draw a line, and when we cut a copy of this out, make sure that the raw edge sits seam allowance over. So that's what we want it to look like on this side. And when we copy and trace this one, draw a line here that is the width of the seam allowance and butt this line here to it, and this is what our gores will be for the correct size. Then if you want to or need to, you can simply redraw in any of the curves or whatever you feel is appropriate to make that shape look better. Remembering everything we do now will go into a sample garment, and we can tweak it at the fit model stage anyway. What we want now is just a reasonable approximation of a finished garment. Oh, and don't forget to add your seam allowances through here, and your hem allowance through here. And if you need help with that, just refer to the article on the website. So let's move on to the sleeve. So let's have a look at this sleeve. On my garment here, this sleeve has a slashed opening which has got turned into ties. There's also a seam line here through the top arm line, and we have a seam line here through the underarm line. Now let's have a look at our block. If we have a look at our block, we need to flare not only from the underarm, but we need to flare the tie at the top arm line. So what this means is we have to work on half of a sleeve at a time. Because I like to be consistent, I want to work on the front sleeve first. So there's a number of elements we have to do to adjust the sleeve into a pattern that we can work with. So take a new sheet of card and let's draw a line down that's going to represent our top arm line. And when you've got that, what I'd like you to do is just place your pattern block on top of it, and we're going to trace around it. Now remember to include that crown notch, and we just want to trace off the front sleeve for now. Right. The length is going to be really immaterial at this stage. The first thing we need to look at is where this band sits on our sleeve here. So visually, where this point is on this piece here. And if you remember, we measured that earlier, and I had 12.5 on that cut line. So I'm going to measure from the underarm up 12.5 and place a mark here. Now the reason I'm working this way is because there's no ease from the underarm towards the first notch. So I have my mark here, but I'm not going to square it across because my front and back measurements are not the same. Often backs are higher than fronts around the neck area. So this line is not actually going to go across, it's going to go up, and we won't know what it's going to go up till we work on the back piece. So I've jumped ahead a few steps here to do the pattern for the sleeve. What I've done is I've measured an approximate length of a sleeve down here and placed a mark. Then I measured from here across with my grading square and placed an approximate position under here and dropped a square line down. And then I just guesstimated 2 inches of flare at the underarm, and I've drawn an underarm seam in. Then what I've done is I've come and had a good look at the sleeve, and I've taken some measurements and I've drawn them in like this, and then I've simply curved this back. We will of course need to check the seam run in a moment, and now I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the back sleeve. Because I want my ties to be identical, I'm now going to pattern my back sleeve almost on top of my front sleeve and copy it out later. So what that means practically is we're going to take our tunic block pattern, place it on the original line like so, and I'm going to draw in the back sleeve. Now I'm going to take my tape measure and measure up the underarm amount that we recorded earlier and place a small mark down. I'm just going to use my tape measure on its short edge, and that's here. Now before I go any further, we need to join these two positions here. This is where our elastic band will be sewn on. So visually, the band will be here, which is this position here. What I need to do now is, and the easiest way to do this is to fold through here and mirror this piece here. So we're going to fold this over and trace through this flare line to make sure we get the same flare line on the other side. And when you do this, what will happen is when you sketch over the top and draw in over those little lines, you will find that they come in like this. We want this point to meet here, and what we need to do now is mirror this on this side. So what will happen is when we fold and trace through that this will end up, and I'll just keep drawing this and we'll finish this up. So once you've traced through all your markings, this is what you will be left with. It does look a little bit confusing, but I'll mark it in different colours so you can see what we're working with. So let's start with the front sleeve. You'll need to place a sheet of pattern making card under here. You'll be tracing this off here, including the notch. You'll be coming here, here, through this line here, and back up. When you do this, you will be adding a seam allowance here, here, and here. Now let's look at the back sleeve. Will run here, here, down, here, up, through here, don't forget the notch, and back through the middle. Remember to add the seam allowance through here. Or did I say seam allowance through here? Hopefully I did. You don't need one through here, you don't need one through here, but you will need one through here and back up. Remembering the notch and remembering this is your straight grain line. If you need help transferring that straight grain line, just refer to the tutorial on moving grain lines on your pattern pieces. It's on the website. So now we have our front sleeve and our back sleeve. And what we've done now, of course, is remove this area here. All that's left now is to pattern the band that in the front has no elastic, and from here around has elastic. And just another note, if you did want to displace those raglan parts here, the seam that you displaced here would be here, and then the seam that you displaced here would be here. So effectively what would happen on this pattern piece is it possibly would look something more like this. So now let's look at the band. So now we need to think about the band, and this band has elastic. A standard elastic width is generally 1 inch, which is 2.5 centimeters, and that's quite handy because when I measured this was 3 centimeters. Now that's handy because 3 centimeters is 1 inch plus another 1/4 inch allowed for. So let's look at the band piece. We want to sew this band in 2 pieces. One piece will go across here, and the next piece will go all the way around the back to here. So let's work out the pattern making of this. So let's do the front band first. There's going to be no elastic in the front band. We need to measure from here to here. And when you have that measurement, we are going to draw a straight line and measure that in. And remembering this is on a folded piece, so we want this on either side like so. Our band width is 30 millimeters, which is 3 centimeters. And because it's a folded piece, I'm going to measure up 3, down 3, and then measure the seam allowance in as well. So what this means is my pattern piece for my band, this is my grain line, is going to look like this, and I'll have a notch here for the fold. So this half here sews onto this piece here, and there will be a seam allowance through there. So that's my front band, and that will be cut 1 because it's a folded piece. Now let's look at the rest. To do the back band, what we need to do is measure here to here, and because it's a fold, multiply that number by 2. So what I have here, times it by 2. Then what I need to do is come to my sleeve, and I need to add my sleeve amount in as well. And when I measure this, I want to measure it not including seam allowances. So what this means is I want to have my first measurement here, which will be the front sleeve, remembering that there's a seam allowance on this side, there isn't in there, so that will sew to this position here. Then I want a back sleeve amount, which is that amount there. Then I want the width of my band at the back, which is this doubled. So this will be center point. So this would be our grain line through here. And then what we're doing is just repeating that again there. Now my band is 3 centimeters or 30 millimeters wide, plus a seam allowance at the top and the bottom, and it's on the fold. So I'm measuring 3 up plus the seam allowance and 3 down plus the seam allowance. And I'm going to join those marks together. And it would be better if I had a nice long straight ruler. It's obviously a little bit harder on the whiteboard. But what this does do, if you do it like this, is it gives you the good position for the notching that you need to join these pieces together. So as far as fast fashion garments go, this pattern would probably take you an hour and a half maybe to put together, and then maybe allow another hour and a half to sew this garment. And let's show you what the finished garment looks like. So very unusual for me, I'm my own fit model today, and to give you my thoughts, let's see, the upper body's very comfortable, it's a good fit on me. The sleeve length is good, the ties are the right length. I reduced the seam length by 6 centimeters to cut the elastic for the back, and that seems to be good. It's not too tight, not too loose, and it's not moving around much. The width of the garment, as far as wearing this as a mini dress is concerned, is good. It has a slight flare. However, if you were narrow hips, you probably would want to bring those side seams in by a good inch on each side, or if you just don't like that flared look, that would be good as well. As far as the raglan cut goes on the upper body, I think because I have narrow shoulders that this is working well, but if I had wider shoulders, I definitely would displace this into a raglan seam. So thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you need any help for pattern making or sewing garments, constructing garments the fashion industry way, just pop on over to my website and make sure you hit the follow button on YouTube for more videos that are coming out from me soon. Thanks for joining me.